Bonjour à tous.
Bonjour, merci d'être là. Désolé pour ces retards. Nous avons eu des questions à discuter, des questions techniques. Et donc, merci d'être là. Je vais vous donner les informations sur la...
Recording in progress.
On ne t'entend plus, Osmany.
OK.
Ça y est,
je pense
c'est
que...
bon.
Sinon,
Oui,
Osmany ne parlait pas.
Nous allons commencer avec Regina. Donc, la transmission a déjà commencé sur notre chaîne YouTube. Et je pense qu'on peut commencer avec Regina et ensuite, je vais prendre la parole pour passer à Thierry. Je vais changer à l'anglais parce que je pense que personne m'entend sur YouTube. So sorry, everyone. We're discussing some technical details here in this webinar, and we are going to start with Regina, who is going to open this webinar. Then I'm going to say a few words before opening the floor to Ève and Thierry, Ève Fouilleux and Thierry Delpeuch, our speakers for this session today. So thank you very much, everyone, for being with us. So just to inform Regina, you can start whenever you are ready. The transmission is already in progress on YouTube.
Thank you so much, Osmany. Thank you so much, Professor Thierry, Professor Ève. It's a pleasure for us to host the last of the 5 webinars in which we are discussing something around half of the book called Political Sociology of Public Action. It's been a great experience. It's been a great pleasure for all of us to have you here in the Zoom room and also in the YouTube chain. We ask all of you to go to the ENAP portal so that you can download the Portuguese version of the book. And also, Osmany will give you all the directions for those who want to buy the book in print. I'd like to stress 3 main features of this partnership we've been having with Labopi and Professor Osmany. It's been quite a long time since we started the project that ended in the publishing of this book. It was in 2018 when Osmany was in a postdoc break, I guess, and he met one of our best professors, one of our dearest presidents here at ENAP, Professor Chico Gaetani. And then he presented himself to him, and therefore he presented himself to ENAP. Since then, we had 2 major events, one in which Professor Osmany held with Professor Fernando Filgueiras and Professor Natalia Koga a seminar on policy transfer, cooperation and policy transfer. I think all the files and presentations are at the ENAP portal too. And we also started the partnership in publishing this book. Yesterday, I was talking to Professor Natalia and also to another professor of ours, Professor Roberto Pires, and they reminded me that it was the first time it was not the first time ENAP published in Portuguese important titles in the public policy area. But this one publication has something special, that is to present to the Brazilian students, to the Brazilian community of practitioners in public policies, the delicacy, the subtlety of the French analysis. And for that, we all thank you, all the authors here presented by Professor Ève Fouilleux, Professor Thierry Delpeuch, and also Professor Osmany. So, with no further delay, I give the floor to Professor Osmany so that he can say something about the partnership also, and to present the guests we'll have today. Osmany, it's on you.
Thank you very much, Regina. It's a great pleasure to be here again. It was wonderful to have this partnership with ENAP for all these years, and I'm really happy that finally we were able to conclude this other step of our partnership, which is the publication of this book. Something that I would like to highlight with ENAP is the fact that ENAP has been one of has been playing a key role in Brazilian policy studies in the community, insofar as it has translated many titles from important authors from abroad, as Regina mentioned, and this is a very important work for the community. In a survey I'm conducting with my colleague Cecilia Osorio from the University of Alberto Hurtado in Chile, we are doing a survey about how we teach public policy in Latin America. The fact that ENAP has been translating so many titles and so many authors in Brazil is something that distinguishes our community from other countries where there are not often such titles available. So this is very important for undergraduate students, graduate students, and other people interested in policy studies who don't speak either English or French or other languages. So this is a very significant work, and I would like to congratulate ENAP for this initiative with us in particular, but with for all other initiatives of translating books into Portuguese. That said, I would like to also mention that this is a very important partnership for us, for the Laboratory of International Public Policies at the Federal University of São Paulo. We have done different things together with ENAP, and it's very important for us to have ENAP as a partner. In this specific cycle of webinars, we also had another partner that joined us, which is the program of public policy and management, the graduate program for public policy and management of the University of São Paulo, where I'm also affiliated to. And I'm very happy that all my students are coming here for this webinars, because this is also part of one of my courses, which is the course where we discuss the political sociology of public action. I would also like to mention that this publication would not have been possible without the partnership of Pacte, Laboratoire des Sciences Sociales of the University of Grenoble, from where Thierry Delpeuch, our invited speaker today, is from, and also from the Center of European Studies of Sciences Po in Paris. Their collaboration was very important for this publication. So in the past weeks, we have been discussing so many important topics of the political sociology of public action. Our idea was to cover an important part of the issues that we discuss in the book, and I'd like to thank also everyone who was watching us from home. We have now more than 200 views on our webinars on YouTube, and your participation, your questions were very important for us to make this event such an exciting experience. So some news. I would like to say that we are working on an English version of the book as well. We have been discussing this with a publisher, and we hope to have some more information soon about this. So we are going to meet with the whole group of the authors and discuss how we are going to proceed with this. Finally, before opening the floor to Thierry Delpeuch and Ève Fouilleux, I would like to kindly invite you to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed yet, this is very important for you to follow everything that we are doing here on the YouTube, especially on public the sociology of public action, on other topics as policy diffusion, development cooperation, and international public policies in general. I would like to inform you as well that unfortunately, Professor Carla Tomazini could not be with us today due to a health issue, and we hope to have her on another webinar with us or another collaboration really soon. She wrote a very important chapter of this book, which is the chapter about the ideas and public action. And today we are only going to have Thierry Delpeuch and Ève Fouilleux. Before I forget to say this, the printed version of the book is also available for you to pre-order. So if you are interested on the printed version of the book, you can pre-order in through internet. But if you want the digital version, is free for you to download on the ENAP website. So we are going to have with us today Professor Ève Fouilleux, who is researcher at CIRAD, and she is one of the main experts in global policies from the perspective of public action in France. And we are very happy to have her here today. She wrote the chapter on this topic. And we also have Thierry Delpeuch, who is, as I mentioned, a professor at Pacte, from the Pacte, the laboratory Pacte from the University of Grenoble. And he wrote with another colleague, Cécile Vigour, a very interesting chapter on law and the public action. Thierry Delpeuch has also worked on policy transfer, in particular with post-communist countries, and Professor Ève Fouilleux has worked a lot with agricultural policies from the international perspectives in her work. So with no further delay, I have talked too much, sorry for that. We're going to open the floor to Ève Fouilleux and then to Thierry Delpeuch. Just to remember everyone that you can ask your questions in Portuguese or in English via the chat here on Zoom or on our YouTube channel. We are going to have the first talk from Ève, Professor Ève, and then from Professor Thierry, and then we are going to move to the questions. We're going to open the floor to the questions. So you can start asking your questions at any time, but we are going to share a message to you a few minutes before we will start collecting the questions. So don't be shy, ask your questions. This is a very rich and important opportunity to have all these two professors here. So with no further delay, now I move the word to Professor Ève Fouilleux. So thank you very much for being here with us, Ève, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Osmany. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very pleased to have had the opportunity to write a chapter of your book, and I'm very proud of it. And today I'm very honored to be here in front of a Brazilian public. Do you see my shared screen now or not?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So so I will go with my presentation, which is about global public policy making. As you just mentioned it before, what I actually try to do in this chapter, and what I will try to present today, it's a bit complicated to present all what I did in the chapter, so I had to choose some aspects, and the main idea I want to share is that is the idea that the French approach of public policies, so-called cognitive analysis of public policies, can bring a lot, at least in my opinion, to the study of international relations and globalization. And it can provide some tools, interesting tools, and way of looking at things for looking at global public policy making. So, in particular, the important. Oh, there is a problem. I don't know why the presentation. Oh yes, it's okay. Well, there's a problem with my presentation, but the idea is that the concept and the concepts which are used in cognitive public policy analysis, just like the sense building, the attention we bring to the sense building in policies and in regulation, the role of ideas, the role of discourses and imageries in power relations, the constant dialectic we focus on between regulation and legitimation. All these aspects are not very often actually looked at in international relation works or in more economic approaches of globalization. So it's what I try to do in my own approach, which mobilizes a particular part of the French approach of public policy, which uses the notions of forum and arenas. It's not; these are not really notions or theory, or it's more heuristic, which allows to look at things when looking at public policy making. And I think they are particularly interesting at the global level. So this approach distinguishes two types of way of arguing and discussing. The first one is about looking for possible solutions, debating with a lot of alternatives, a lot of options under discussion, and which takes place in special spaces, which we call forums. And another way of discussing and arguing, which is more targeted at negotiating, bargaining, and ultimately deciding. And it's what we call arenas. And And we think the rules of the game of the argumentation in these two types of spaces are different. And the other important part of my approach, which is important to have in mind when well, at least for me to explain when I try to explain my approach, is the fact that I reconstitute the process of public policy making as a process of institutionalization of ideas. So this is what I will try to explain now. And yes, the idea is to reconstitute from the more recent stages to the more older ones through the empirical words, the progressive selection process among alternatives which take place. I tried to illustrate this on this scheme with the idea that at the beginning you have a lot. The stars are like ideas and alternatives, and in the beginning of the discussion about policies, you may have more, a lot of alternatives, certainly not as much as I present here, but at least it was to make the thing clearer. But let's say there are, at the beginning of the process, more alternative under discussion, and progressively a narrowing of the process. And at the end, the decision and the last bargains take place among much fewer ideas or options of policy receipts. And so my idea is that you have a progressive selection of alternatives through different spaces of discussion, which are from specialized forums to the policy forum, which is more targeted at policy making already, and to the arena to end up with the making of the public policy, which I define as a referential set of ideas of representation, which gives sense to the policy, which gives the vision, which is tried to be pursued through the policy, and a set of instruments which sometimes are a bit different from the vision which is presented as the main discourse. So this is the public policy. And let's say globally, my idea is to try to understand how this selection process takes place, what counts in this process, and how can we understand it. And my presentation will deal with this issue, let's say, at the global level, and more with trying to understand what happens at the level of the policy forum mainly. So that's it. So let's see. If you want, if you allow me, what I plan to do is to present first, because this approach comes first at the national level, to explain first the approach at the national level, to then go to the global level and understand how it's different, because I think it's very important to understand the difference of the dynamics of debates between a national level and a global level relating to policies. So at the national level first, well, we have this process I just presented before. With the green stuff is the policy forum, and the process of selection of ideas comes from the policy forum to the. But you have this in the middle. It's not good. Does this? We'll take it off. It's better, no? Anyway. So the flow of ideas goes from the public policy forum to the policy arena and to make the public policy. And the idea is that this is fed through. Well, there are two main types of actors on these forums: the policymakers and the administrative elite. And the policymaker comes from the politics fora. They are elected on the politics fora, but a lot of other types of ideas coming from different types of forums, the scientific forum, sectoral or professional forums, and civil society forum, which bring each one through the fights and argumentation there is on each of them, bring some different kinds of ideas to the policy forum, and they all respond to different types of rule of the game in the arguing process or the argumentation process. So this is mainly the idea, and the politics forum brings some important types of actors on the policy forum, which are the policymakers, and they are elected through, and the election is the type of legitimacy and legitimizing process which bring the ideas on the policy forum, supposedly. In a democracy like France, for instance, this model is based more or less on France. On the scientific forum, you have some paradigms or disciplines competing, and let's say some fights among ideas, which goes through peer reviewing, and the ideas come to the public policy forum through legitimacy coming from expertise or from academic glory, let's say. And on the sectoral professional forum, you have competition through elections. I will not go into details now because it's too complicated. And same for civil society, NGOs, who bring other types of ideas. So this is more or less how I see the process of bringing the ideas in the policy debate on the public policy forum. And you have also another type of actors, which are the private actors, companies, firms, corporations. They not only practice what we call usually lobbying, which is lobbying is properly the idea of going in the lobby of the decision to influence the decision. So it's not only influencing, in my view, their role is not only the role of lobbying, influencing directly on the policy arena, but it's also on influencing much much before the decision process on different policy forums. I don't know how to say amont, but upwards, let's say, in the selection of ideas, the process of selection of ideas, which takes place in this model. This, if you read French, you can go to see this paper, which I wrote with Bruno Jobert in the journal called Gouvernement Action Publique, in which we detail very much this, and we also detail empirical illustration on how the globalization transformed the way the policy debate and policy decision are taken in France for some decades. But let's go now, inspired by this approach of the role of ideas in institutionalization of decision and public policy decision, I try to look at what happens at the international level. At the international level, it's a bit different. You have many, for instance, if we try to understand how an international organization works, where you have different states interacting, bargaining among among themselves, and exchanging things with the administrative elite, international civil servant, you know. So this is an international organization which has no link with the election and citizens through elections, contrary to what happens at the national level. A very thin link with the professional forum, with some unions being represented sometimes at the international level, but it's a very, very weak link in terms of formal decision taking or decision making. Same with civil society, a little bit of NGO, social movement may try to organize counter meetings or counter events, but it's very few and very weak in terms of operation. But sort of important exchanges and relation with the academic forum and expertise, and through consulting mainly, and through exchanges of some experts coming from the scientific forum going to work in international organization. And so this is an important way of legitimation for some international organization, because the other important thing to understand here is the role of the power relation that takes place take place among international organizations themselves, with some international organization having a kind of power or an influence on other ones. And specifically, and it's what I show in the chapter, transversal economic organization have they gain a very high level of legitimacy on the scientific forum because they are themselves actors, main actors, central core actors on the scientific forum. They have a kind of high level of legitimation through this activity, notably, and they influence directly the sectoral organization. For in the agri-food sector, for instance, it's the FAO or something like that. I will show that now. So this is very important to understand the role of the legitimating processes in the relation and power relation among international organizations. And you have also the firms, of course, just like in the at the national level, they also try to influence at all stages the individual international organizations scenes of bargaining, I mean, say arena with different types of international organization interacting, and through financing, through expertise, and they also, and it's a specificity of what I call a kind of privatization of the global public policy making. They also now, for some decades, propose their own forums and arenas where things are discussed and decided and regulation tools are implemented. And this is the growing influence of private regulation, and their legitimacy is built, and we will see it afterwards, mainly on the fact that the initiatives which are organized are so-called multi-stakeholder initiatives and inclusive initiatives. And so it's kind of discourse based on democratic approaches, etc. That's it. That's the discourse which is taken, at least. So this is the picture of how I see forum and arenas at the global level. Just a point which I have not mentioned, and I think it's important, is in one international organization, maybe one forum or an arena, or also an actor in other international forum or arenas. It's a detail, but perhaps it's important to mention it. So I will go successively from what happens at the international levels among international organizations and the power relation among them, and then I will go to private regulation. Taking the example of the agri-food public policy, global public policy, agri-food global field, and I will try to illustrate this of what happens in this field. So, in the global or international agri-food fields, you have a clear sharing of tasks among organizations. As I was saying just before, you have transversal economic organizations such as the World Bank for developing countries, or the OECD for so-called northern or developed countries, which produce policy tools, policy assessment tools, measurement tools. They also provide modules of capacity building for civil servants, etc. And through these activities, they are able to influence the policy debates, global policy debates, and they impose, in a way, their tools of their measurement tools, which imply some visions and some which orient the policy debates in some directions. And this direction is very much, as I was saying before, influenced by an economic approach, neoclassical or mainstream, let's say, economic approach. And well, it's important to see this. And sometimes these ideas are directly transferred into formal constraints For the World Bank, it's obviously the loans which are imposed together with the fact that they give loans if their ideas are applied at the national level. It's all the story of the structural adjustment in developing countries, for instance. But you have also the WTO organization rules, which are also inspired directly in the agri-food sector. It's inspired directly from the OECD work, for instance, on policy support. I cannot go into details on this, but we can discuss it afterwards. But in the 80s and 90s, the terms and the visions in the debate, in the global debate on agri-food, has totally switched thanks to some very specific works done at the OECD, which have transferred and legitimized the liberalization movement of all agricultural policy in the world. So that's it. And so the World Trade Organization, which is a kind of pre-institutionalization stage of the ideas put forward by these transversal organizations. And now that the World Trade Organization is a bit declining, it's replaced by bilateral commercial agreements, but the same kind of things. You can also think about ISO and the international standards, which are targeted at easing and smoothing international and favoring international trade also. Well, so the idea is that these organizations, they produce a referential, a global vision, a mainstream vision, which is imposed on sectoral organization. In the agri-food sector, you have the three Romans, very famous FAO, WFP, and IFAD, which have a very weak legitimacy on the international arena, and have very much difficulties to produce some autonomous policy prescription. This is the case, for instance, of FAO. Some economists inside have tried to produce their own measurement or policy assessment tools for developing countries, but they are not allowed to do this. They have to be capped by the World Bank and the OECD, things like that. So there are some trials by these organizations to exist, but they are imposed more or less. Their sectoral policy prescriptions are more or less imposed by other organizations. And you have these two ones, which are a bit higher in terms of profile on the international arena in relation to their status of, they are WTO standardization agencies, the Codex Alimentarius, which makes the norms for food, and the World Organization for Animal Health, which is also a standardization agency for the WTO. So this is the picture of the structures, let's say, of how the debate on agri-food takes place at the global level, and which ends up with a mainstream on agri-food policies, which is about a constant encouragement of international trade and expansion of this international trade. It's about eliminating market distorting policy instruments, and it's about connected to this, you have the socio-technical model of agriculture, which is promoted, which is chemical and industrial agriculture. So this is one part of the picture. The other part of the picture, and I have 3 minutes to do this, so I will try to be quick because I had promised 25 minutes and I'm already at 22. So the other trend, which is important to get, is the privatization of the global regulation. And this privatization has taken place at the beginning, that's the paradox, with some rising critiques of the mainstream international trade approach of agriculture. And it has gone through the affirmation of a specific tool, which is the voluntary sustainability standards, which is a special regulation tools which takes more and more importance in the agri-food field at the global level. This took place in three ways. A first wave in the 80s with some social movement arguing against chemical agriculture or international trade, such as fair trade or such as organic farming. and they have used this voluntary standard tool to say, we are the civil society, we can propose different approach of agriculture, and we want our products to be visible for the consumers, to be bought, and to be and for them to be sure that these are the different products than the one proposed by the mainstream and hegemonic actors. And this is a very marginal, of course, share of agri-food trade, but it exists, and it was they were the first one using the standard approach and label approach for sustainability, or for a different globalization, let's say. And then you have a second wave, which has shown the potential power, the powerful dimension of these tools, which are voluntary standards, which is the global gap experience. These are standards which are required by the retail business, and they are supposed, de jure, let's say, they are voluntary standards, but actually, they are required by all big retailers, they are de facto obligatory, compulsory standards, actually, and they have a market power, which is very important. And this gave the idea of new actors to put in place their multi-stakeholder initiatives with the voluntary standards used as a kind of in between the standard as critique and the standard as a mean of business protection, which was the case of the retailers. I have no time to explain the history of global gap, but it was a question of being more powerful on the market. So the new standards came up targeted at sustainability with the idea of multi-stakeholderism and a mainstream global, and the idea to transform the value chain and transform globalization. These examples are, the first one was the FSC, the second one was the MSC, and one which is known in Brazil is RTRS, is about soy or palm oil, which are very famous and which are supposed to be able to transform global value chains and to make globalization more respectful of social and environmental aspects. And this is not only these ones, but they have become bigger and bigger. They are bigger. They are associated in a big alliance, which is called ICL, International Standardization and Accreditation and Labeling. I don't remember the ICL alliance, but this is an organization which is supposed to represent all the standards of this type, and they are not only in agri-food. They are you see in jewelry, in golf. You have some sustainable golf there. You have all sorts of things, biofuels. You have all sorts of global chain or textile, which are under this type of sustainability standards, which in their legitimating discourse, they always refer to WTO and ISO, for instance, and to international trade. So paradoxically, they have become a kind of justification while making it a little bit more respectful of social and environmental aspects, but they have become a kind of justification of international trade. So it has been recuperated in a way by the hegemonic actor. This is really a private-based approach, but that does not mean that the private actors are not there. You have the World Bank there, of course, who is a member of many of these initiatives. You have UNCTAD, you have the International Trade Center, who are really providing intellectual resources, policy resources to make these standards better and to make them functioning. They have even founded a United Nation Forum on sustainability standards. So both finance and United Nations international organization are very much targeted at them, and they, although they are very private initiatives and private regulation tools, they are now reused by public policymakers, and especially the European Union, for instance, which uses them and reincorporate them in their own regulations. And this is the case, for instance, in the biofuel directive by the European Union, which uses many of the standards as indicator of good, sustainable biofuel, which can enter the European market. So this is my conclusion. You can see a further marketization of the agri-food field through the coming of new private actors as policymakers on the global arena, because it's a further marketization because it first confirms the international trade as the main value, let's say, but it's also a business about certification, selling standards, selling certification services, selling accreditation services. It's all a very complex and very financially interesting business. It's a kind of privatization of the regulation and deliberations because these are really private forums and arena which are taking place and which are then reincorporated in the regulation. And it's also, actually, we can conclude on this, it's also an incorporation of the critique or a canalization of the critique, as we say, by hegemonic actors. So this is what I wanted to say about the global field. I'm sorry, I'm 30 minutes almost, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ève, for this very insightful presentation on global public policies and public action. I would like to inform the audience that this is one of the interesting elements of the sociology of public action, is that we have different works bringing together international relations and public policy studies. In our book, for example, we have one chapter about, which is the chapter of Ève Fouilleux, about the global public policies, but we have also another chapter about the international circulation of instruments of public action and the idea of transnational comparison, which is a chapter that was signed by Magdalena Radziński, Patrick Hassenteufel, and myself. And we also have another chapter about the uses of the supranational, discussing the dynamics of regional integration in European Union and the role of national actors. So in our book, we have at least 3 chapters that directly engage with what we call public policies beyond borders. And Ève made a very interesting presentation about these dynamics. So thank you very much, Ève. We're going to move now to Thierry Delpeuch, who wrote the chapter about public action and law. Just wanted to remind everyone that if you want to start asking your questions to Ève, you can write down in the chat, and we are going to open the floor for the replies to your questions after Thierry's presentation. So Thierry, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Perfect. So I'm very happy to have participated in the elaboration of these books and to participate today to this seminar. I'm going to present the chapter that we wrote with Cécile Vigour. So I'm from Grenoble, and my colleague Cécile Vigour is from Bordeaux. And this chapter is entitled Law and Public Action. In France, it was not until the 90s that public policy analysis took an interest in the legal and judicial dimensions of public action. An important stream of research on this issue developed in this time. These approaches recognize the law as a fundamental aspect of public policy. They explore the role that legal and judicial institutions play in the construction, implementation, on outcomes of public action. 3 research perspectives I can't sorry. Do you see the PowerPoint moving or not?
No.
No?
It's not moving.
Because I have 2 screens on the, it creates problems with Zoom. So I go back to just 1 screen. Now you can see something, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay. So let's do with that. So three research perspectives has been developed in France. The first one seeks to characterize precisely the place and role of law in public action processes. A second avenue of research focuses on the increasing complexity of the relationship between legal processes and public policy. It studies 4 aspects of this complexification, which are the managerialization of law, its democratization, and its internationalization and judicialization. I will not speak so much of the question of internationalization today. And the first perspective examines how policy actors use the legal and judicial resources available to them to influence public action. I will try now to say something about the main aspects of French research on the relationship between law and public action. The first aspect is that French research on the legal regulation of public policies is part of the international debates on this issue. There is not a huge originality of French research. However, it is possible to identify 5 characteristics of French approaches. Firstly, French research is strongly rooted in sociology. It can be sociology of law, political sociology, and the sociology of public action. Secondly, the study of relationships between law and public policy is characterized by a strong interdisciplinary between legal science, sociology, and political science. Thirdly, there is little French work based on quantitative methods on that topics. It's mainly qualitative research. Fourthly, French approaches are interested in the power games and strategies that surround the development and implementation of legal regulations. These approaches draw on Max Weber's comprehensive sociology to analyze the uses of law by various stakeholders of public action. Fifth, the French approaches are particularly attentive to the relationship between the different types of normativity and social forms of control that frame social situations. These approaches focus on the way in which actors use legal resources. They consider the legal framework of a public policy as an opportunity structure. And finally, French research is focused on a limited number of issues. The main themes are the social and political significance of rights, how regulations are implemented by administrative actors at ground level, the use of the law by disadvantaged group to fight injustice. Another topic is the making of the legal frameworks of public policies. and another one is the Europeanization of public policies legal frameworks. And on all these topics, analysis focus on the study of policy actors. Now, I will say a word on each of the main themes I identified. Concerning the stream of research that studies the place and role of the law in public action, their main achievement is to have demonstrated that the law is at the same time an external framework, a constitutive element, and a product of public action. The law is seen as an essential component of the institutional environment of public action. It provides the actors with a set of specific constraints and resources, which constitute the legal framework of this policy. This framework shapes policy in three ways. First of all, the law contributes to the social construction and to the dissemination of categories and ways of thinking that allow actors to grasp and to understand the situations calling for a public response. Secondly, the policy's legal framework imposes principles, limits, and courses of action that are difficult to deviate from because of the high probability of being sanctioned in case of violation. Finally, the policy legal framework establishes mechanisms for resolving disputes arising from public action. Disputes may be settled through judicial adjudication or through alternative dispute resolution mechanism like arbitration, mediation, conciliation, or settlement between legal professionals. But the law should not be considered exclusively as an external determining factor of public action. The legal regulations that are part of public policy are, as a matter of fact, interpreted and translated by the actors. They are subject to adaptation and appropriation. This is why they must be considered as a constitutive element of public policy. The law is used to acknowledge and prioritize the objective interests and values that a public policy intends to promote or protect. Moreover, law is one of the communication languages that policy actors use to perform their social exchanges. Law is also used to organize the design and implementation of public policy. It is used to allocate roles, powers, and responsibilities between the various stakeholders. Because of this omnipresence of law, policy actors have no choice but to position themselves in relation to the law. They must endorse legal identities. They must use legal categories. They must rely on legal skills in order to make choices and to define strategies. Finally, the law is also a product of public action. Public policy often consists in granting rights to certain categories of population. These rights can take various forms. It can be permissions, empowerments, prohibitions, limitations, and so on. Concerning the stream of research and the increasing complexity of the relationship between legal process and public policy, French research has shed some original light on three dynamics. The first one is the managerialization of public policy legal frameworks. The second one is the democratization of the making of these frameworks. And the third one is the judicialization of social interaction associated with policy processes. So, first of all, the managerialization. What we can see is that the rise of management approaches and concerns for efficiency in public policy is leading to a change in public policy legal frameworks. these frameworks are evolving to become more than before instruments oriented towards the solving of public problems. At the same time, the flexibility of legal regulations also make them more unclear, as with criminal offenses such as psychological harassment. This strengthens the power, of course, and of implementation actors to define what precisely is the prescriptive content of a regulation. The legal regulation of public policies is to a large extent defined by the way in which government officials, administrative managers, field agents, and citizens, as well as their legal advisors, interpret and operationalize legal prescriptions that are issued to them. Contractual techniques are important in managerialized legal frameworks as they combine flexibility and coordination capacity. As a result of the expansion of managerial logics in public policies, legal regulation is less and less conceived as a guarantee of systematicity, generality, coherence, and legality. And it is more and more conceived as a tool for achieving efficiently the desired outcomes. So it could be an important element in the debate around the decline of the rule of law in the world. The legal framework and legal instruments are assessed accordingly to their ability to produce the desired results with a minimum of unintended consequences. The second point is on democratization. The increasing complexity of the legal dimension of public policies is also the result of the increasingly participatory nature of the policy making and policy implementation processes. We can say that legal aspects of public policies have been democratized because social movements, NGOs, and interest groups have become more directly involved in the design and implementation of policy legal frameworks. Stakeholders are looking for rulemaking processes that meet criteria of openness and transparency. They want information and knowledge to be shared. They want an adversarial debate where all arguments have the opportunity to be defended. They want consideration for the sectoral specificities. They want responsiveness to the expectations of all participants. And they want the widest possible range of particular situations to be taken into consideration. In order to incorporate the claims for consultation and participation, policy legal frameworks are more oriented towards setting up governance structures and deliberative processes than towards defining substantive objectives. Implementation can also have a participatory dimension in order to gain the support of the different stakeholders and to limit opposition. This development towards democratization leads to a growing preference for legal mechanisms based on incentives rather than on sanctions, and based on persuasions and negotiations rather than on command and control. And finally, the question of the judicialization. What I can say is that the judicialization encompasses a variety of developments. It entails the rise of international courts, the growing role of constitutional courts in defining policies, the increased role of courts in dealing with public problems, the growing propensity of interest groups to use litigation strategies, on the increasing use of legal channels by social movements to advance their causes. One of the causes of judicialization lies in the development of awareness of individual rights and in the growing concern for their protection. In order to claim their rights, citizens are less and less reluctant to hold those rights. They are less or less reluctant to take authorities accountable for what they have done, whether that authorities are political, administrative, professional, or technical in nature. The judicialization of public action is also a consequence of growing difficulty of political authorities to develop policies that are consensual enough in the context of an increasing pluralism of interest. Entrusting the judge with the task of specifying the legal framework of a public policy and of arbitrating between different interests makes it possible to depoliticize and technicalize certain issues that are too much contentious, such, for example, in France, wearing the Islamic veil in a public space, or the rights of homosexuals, or the migration policies. This allows governments to reduce the degree of publicity of certain controversies. It allows to limit protest mobilizations. It allows to avoid the unpopularity of certain decisions or certain effects of public action. This also allows to reduce the pressure of interest groups and it allows decision makers to be less constrained by partisan competition. Judicialization gives rise to a particular style of policymaking described as the politics of right. This concept was developed by Anne Revillard and Pierre Bourdieu. In this style of public policy, judicial action is a means of influencing the definition of the public response. The legal vector for change is the case law, the jurisprudence of the courts. Policy audiences and legal professionals, policy audiences are legal professionals and litigants. And the main resources for action are legal norms and the capacity to invoke them. French research on judicialization is rather critical. It emphasizes that resorting to the courts to protect or develop rights does not automatically lead to concrete change in public action, as the legal system is often favorable to dominant interests. It points out that the courts have little capacity to make their orientations on decision effective, as they do not directly control the actor responsible for implementing public policies. However, judicialization is recognized as having a certain potential to improve democratic deliberation and to change the balance of power between stakeholders in the policy sectors. Insofar as some judges use their powers to promote the rights of the weakest. This evolution can benefit groups that do not have enough power to make their voice heard in the political sphere. Moreover, judicialization drives implementation actors to be more transparent, to justify their decision more, and to respect more strictly the rights of the citizens. French research on judicialization raises the questions of possible loss of influence of political actors in policymaking as a result of the increasing power of the courts. It questions the widespread idea of the expansion of judicial power. It prefers an alternative hypothesis, which considers judicialization as an expression, among others, of the increasing complexity of the public action. As a matter of fact, policy-making processes involve a growing variety of social actors, including a lawyer and judge. If legal actors matter more than previously in the making of public action, this is also the case for other professional worlds. For example, those of science and technology, through the use of expertise, or the media sector. To finish, I will say a word about how policy actors use legal and judicial resources to influence public action. French research on the use of law by street-level bureaucrats and enforcement agents has highlighted the fact that their legal work is increasingly similar to that of judges. A growing part of the activities of these agents consists of investigating complex cases, assessing contentious situations on a case-by-case basis, reconciling contradictory demands, combining legal imperatives with other considerations such as social, technical, economic, financial, ethical, and political ones, and balancing the interests involved in order to make decisions. So it is typically the activity of a judge. This French research shows that disparities in local legal practices can lead to unequal treatment and even to discrimination. Like implementers, many policy constituents are able to make active and creative use of policy legal frameworks. All over the world, citizens, civil society groups, and social movements are showing a growing propensity to use legal resources to claim existing or new rights and to influence the orientations and implementation of public policies. This social movement can find sometimes allies among judges and legal professionals who are committed to social transformation. These professionals who join social movements are called cause lawyers and are subject to specific studies in France like elsewhere. But the obligation to use legal professionals is also a problem for social movements, as these professionals risk to dispossess activists of the leadership of the collective action and to denature the objective of the movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thierry, for this very interesting presentation. I think that one of the very important aspects of this junction is the fact that often when we go to legal, to law studies, they have a very specific methods and a way of thinking, and they are using concepts and frameworks that are very different from public policy studies. And public policy studies often forgets about this the legal constraints that you mentioned in the analysis, by focusing more on the agents and the processes of public policy making. And I think that this junction between you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation, this interdisciplinarity that French studies has, bringing together law, sociology, and political science, is very interesting for us. Is a very interesting approach for us to understand contemporary public policy making. So if you're interested on learning more and going even further on this topic, I strongly recommend you to read the chapter number 9 of signed by Thierry Delpeuch and Cécile Vigour. So it's also very nice to have you both here, Thierry and Ève. insofar as on what regards Ève, your topic, your presentation today, and your topic of research is strictly connected to what we do in the International Laboratory of Public Policies, and which is discussing policy transfer, development cooperation, international organizations, and so on. And to Thierry, Regina was telling me before that they are having a workshop on law and public policies at ENAP in this topic soon. So it's very, very nice to have you both here. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to ask them to reproduce them here to you. The first one is even a question that came in French, and it's for Thierry. I think that you can read this one, Thierry, but I'm going to quickly translate for the audience who's on YouTube to following us. So she says, and I believe this is from Regina. She says that here in Brazil we are discussed a lot the concept of a strategic contentious. It's a fact that numbers of actors that are not satisfied with public decisions ask for the judicial power to try to establish a more fair relation and ensure their rights. However, there are cases of those who try not only to influence the decisional process, but also to change the political process itself by using the judicial power with a strategy of choice or of known of veto power. Do you think that this term can also be used, applied for the French reality? And complementing, in addition to that, what are your suggestions of research? Your suggestions of research about the way practitioners can position themselves to the growing reality of judicialization of the public sphere. I hope everything was right. This was me trying to translate French to English. We have another question here, which is also to Thierry. It's from Paulina Boechat. She asks, what are your views on the legitimacy of constitutional courts arbitrating and interfering in public policy design and reach? Is judicial activism an obstacle in the state's planning of public policy? We have another question from Laïs Lefebvre from the program of public management at the University of São Paulo. She asks if the judicialization of public policy by social movement has increased. She affirms that the judicialization of public policy by social movement has increased. Professor Thierry, do you believe that there is a change of the forum used by movements to question public policies? And there is a last question for Ève. It's from Ana Cortez, PhD candidate at the University of São Paulo. She thanks for the presentations, and the question is to Ève. I mentioned, she says that in the chapter of Hadjiski, Hassenteufel, and Oliveira, in the book, they point to the action of international brokers, agents who use the international arena to reinforce their positions in the national field. Catherine Seeking calls this the boomerang process. How do you see the use of international arena for national purposes and the relationship between national and international arenas. So I think this is enough for this first round of questions. We can start with Ève and then move to Thierry following the order. So thank you, the audience, for the questions. Ève, now the floor is yours. Thank
you. Yes, thank you very much for the question. This is a very interesting and important question, although my question is a little bit more how the global field really becomes to be autonomous from national levels and very much pushed by private actors. But I can answer on this question also. For instance, in the case of if you look at how the global debate took place at the international level this time on the question of agroecology. Agroecology, it's a kind of alternative way to seeing at agriculture policy and agricultural practices, far from the mainstream chemical and industrial agriculture, going to more natural way of doing things with smallholders and peasants and alternative way of seeing research, etc. It's a very alternative way of looking at agriculture, and it was, of course, totally banned from the global arena for decades. And it was, and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, is known as the green revolution champion, meaning the promoter of this industrial chemical model of agriculture. And for since the end of the 2010s, mid 2010s, I think it was around, I don't remember now, but it was around 2015 it began. The FAO launched, pushed by some actors within the organization, in alliance with some governments. They pushed the idea of trying to make a little bit more, to give a little bit more of audience and to be allowed as an international organization to work on this. And so France in particular pushed a lot this idea of agroecology with the French minister was called at the time Stéphane Le Foll, and he was instrumental together with the Swiss minister, the Swiss ambassador, and also the Brazilians, and many countries tried to make some alliances to push this concept. But in the case of France in particular, it was clearly also a way for him to push his agenda in France, because he had tried to push this agroecology agenda to try to change a little bit the power relation which were at stake between the socialist government and his way of trying to change a little bit of agricultural policy and going towards less pesticides, etc. We have many problems around this issue in France, and it was a way. So he announced this idea of making the French agriculture policy an agroecologic policy, and he was confronted with a big opposition, facing big tension on the side of the farmers and big farmers unions, which are dominant and hegemonic in France. And he really used also the fact that the FAO recognized the agroecology concept and as a way to get it more easily institutionalized on the national arena. But so that exists, and that has always existed in I think in international bargainings and in international organizations. But I think this is interesting, and that has been quite well studied, I'm sure, in many fields. But what is interesting is also how national actors, but private actors use in a context of globalization and globalized economic flux, they use international arenas to ease their strategy, both at national and international and I'll say global. I distinguish the international way and the global, putting the private actors as main political actors in the picture. But I think it's complementary. And of course, instrumentalization of what happens at the global level to push national things happens. And of course, it's obvious, yes. I don't know what to say in addition to this.
Thank you very much, Ève, for this insightful response. I would like to remember everyone, if you want to ask your questions, please write down in the chat. You can also ask your questions in Portuguese, and we will be very happy to translate them to the participants. If you prefer, you can also write your questions in French. We are also going to translate. So you can write your questions in the chat. Thierry, the floor is yours to reply to the questions.
Thank you. All the questions are at the same time very interesting and sometimes difficult. So do you believe that there is a change of the forum used by movement to question public policies? I think in the case of France, it's more recent than, of course, in the United States. But I would say yes. If we consider the main issues of the time, climate change, gender equality, on this kind of issues, clearly there is a change of the forum used by movement. In France, very recently, trials have begun to be launched against the states for not acting against climate change. So activists begin to see that they are more levied to change public policy through judicial forums than through political forums. Maybe the reason is that in political forums, the oppositions are very, very strong, industrial interest and so on. And the judicial forums offer new possibilities to constrain the state to do more against environmental risks. Okay, you understand me? Alors, after there is a question on the legitimacy of judicial forums to do that, to constrain public policies on political actors. I would say in France, the legitimacy of judicial actors is not high. I think it's the same thing than in Brazil. Traditionally, they have 20% of citizens that there is no more than 30% of citizens who trust judicial institutions in France. The justice is an institution with the lowest legitimacy in France, at the same level as journalists and political parties. But I think the social movements and activists, so on, rely on them because they are efficient. Not so much because they are legitimate, but because it's an efficient way to obtain something. And they are not very legitimate, but judicial decisions are very strong by themselves in a system of rule of law. So they don't need to be legitimate to be an efficient way of seeking to obtain results. And a very important point regarding this aspect is that there is a level of jurisdiction highest than the Constitutional Court in France, that is the European Court. And a lot of activist movements have a strategy to go through litigation in European courts to constrain the French government to do things, to change public policies. Okay, and so it may be the Human Rights Court, the European Human Rights Court, and the European Court of Justice. We have two main European jurisdiction. And their decisions are translated into European law, and European law is superior to French law. Okay, so on doing litigation in European jurisdiction develop more and more. So what we have to take into consideration to have a reflection on the efficiency of using litigation to change public policy there is a main limitation that is the law itself, and to have a chance to change public policy, you have to have legal grounds. So you have to think something in the law that give you a chance to obtain the results you want if you go in a jurisdiction. And you have to have proper legal processes. So the opportunities existing in judicial forums can have strong effects, but they are limited by the legal norms and the legal procedures. I hope I am clear. You have less possibilities to act to influence public policy, but these possibilities can be very strong if you have the proper legal grounds and you are efficient in using these grounds in jurisdictions. And the last thing I would like to say is relating to what you say, Osmany, on the question of interdisciplinarity and the difficulty to public policy analysis to take account of the legal dimension. I think there is a field of study where there is a very strong interdisciplinarity between public policy analysts, sociologists, lawyers, and so on, professor of law, and so on. It is the study of transnational regulations. With the globalization, more and more sectors of regulation are framed and decided at the transnational level, since 30 to 40 years, there have been a lot of interdisciplinary studies on the emergence and development of these transnational regulations. They are a very interesting piece of research. For example, Terence Hallyday, Thomas Schaffer, Marie-Laure Jellick, Saline Anderson, and so on. which are at the cross, which cross political science, sociology, and law very efficiently. And there are some academic journals like Law and Social Inquiry or American Journal of International Law, where you can see a political scientist doing a so for example, legal specialist of international law doing state-of-the-art of political science research on transnational regulation to say to their colleague, law professor, look, what political scientists do is very interesting. And in this field of law and globalization, the communication between the different disciplines is very, very active. And so I think the lack of interdisciplinarity is more at the national level than at the transnational level.
Thanks very much, Thierry. Thanks very much, Ève. This is very important. I'm liking a lot this webinar because also part of our students are doing interdisciplinary trajectories. They maybe first start their undergraduate studies either in international relations or law or sociology, and they get interested to public policies, and they go to a specific master or PhD program where they can investigate or dive deeper in this in public policy studies. So this is very interesting what you both have brought to the discussion. Something that is also interesting is the importance that often we don't take into account, but is the importance of considering the different levels, domestic, international, global, into our observations, into our analysis of public policies. So this work on the area of transnational regulations is very interesting, and I think that it also dialogues with what Ève presented previously. So I have a couple of questions for this round. I would also like for the audience to write down their questions in the chat for a last round of questions after this. The first one is a question from Georgia from the University of São Paulo. She has a question to Ève. She says that recently in São Paulo, a representative of the Brazilian Association of Food Industry occupied the office as the president occupied the seat of president, the position of president in the main state forum to discuss food and nutrition public policies, which is a space that attempts to create alternatives to the access of proper nutrition, proper food and nutrition, healthy food and nutrition in a society as the Brazilian society with so many inequalities. The question is, if you see any legitimacy in this appointment, and if you, how do you suggest an approach to face such a conflict of interests?
Osmany, please, can you copy it in the chat, because I didn't get very much precisely the beginning. If you can copy it into.
Sorry, I'm copying it in the chat, but it was written in Portuguese, so this is why my translation was not that That's good.
Sorry, that's
But
fine. In Portuguese, that's fine. I will.
Okay. So we could add to this question: how can we investigate or understand such issue from a policy studies perspective? And I would also like to ask another question to Thierry. Meanwhile, Ève can read the question in the chat. So last week, Thierry, we had Charlotte Halpern presenting the instruments approach here, and we have a very intense discussion with her about the notion of instruments. How do we do research about policy instruments from the French perspective, and so on. And I would like to ask you, insofar as you are discussing law, how this there can be a dialogue or a connection or a rapprochement between these two approaches, or if they are completely separated types of analysis. So if they can be combined, or if you have experience or know works that combine these two approaches. So this is the question I would like to ask to you, and I think it would be really interesting also for students to see this combination between chapters. In the book, we have very specific thematic chapters, but this does not mean that we can combine different approaches and so on. And I have another question to Ève, which is more about how can we understand the ideas behind global public policies. So you presented this movement in two steps. So first, in the domestic arena, it works like this, and then in the international, it works like this. But I wanted to have you a few words from you about how can we grasp these nuances between ideas. When we are dealing with the domestic level, we have parties, we have leaders, we have specific figures, movements that operate in the domestic context, and they have specific issues that are maybe easier for us to understand. When we move to the international level, we have an even bigger plethora of agents with interests, in different interests and ideas, trying to push their worldview or their political projects into the global agenda. And I think this is very complex to understand. So I would like to hear you a little bit on this. Maybe if you can cite your own work or your own strategy to trace how ideas move into international organizations and so on. So just a general question. I think it would also be enlightening for students willing to start investigating how global public policies work. So this is it. I open now the floor to Ève and then to Thierry.
Okay, thank you very much for these two questions, which are, I think, very important and very interesting. For the first one, regarding the national situation and the fact that someone who has big conflicts of interest, like this guy from the representative of the big Brazilian Association of Food Industry as a president of a forum discussing food and nutrition policies. Actually, it's not an exception, I would say, and in France, it has been the case for decades to have for instance, as a French, the Minister of Agriculture has for many times has been directly the ex-president of the union of the big union of the big farmers union in France, which has which has a very specific vision and very industrial and oriented vision of what should agriculture be. So it's not an exception. I think it's very connected. In this case, as in the French case I've just mentioned, the legitimacy of the person who has this kind of position is connected to his political connections. I'm sure the current Brazilian government has made this nomination, and as is the case in France, when there was historically big connections between the FNSEA, la Fédération Nationale des Syndicats d'Exploitants Agricoles, so the big farmers union, and the right-wing political parties, and they made so the dynamics of debates, which I represented as an arrow on my forums. Actually, it's a bit more complex than this, because you have alliances which takes place between the actors among the forums, and which help them in their fight, or in their process of becoming the representative of the forum on the policy forum. So you very often have some connection between people from the unions and political parties, and then they become policymakers. So it's apparently what happened in Brazil in this case, and it's obviously it can be seen as a conflict of interest. And how to face this? I think it's very much the problem of changing public policy, and it's a question of power relations. So it's a question of having either the electors changing their votes, or social movements in the street trying to push on the political power in place. But I'm a bit ashamed to say this in the current situation of Brazil. I don't know how to I have no advice to tell on this, but the other thing, which is typically the case in the agricultural policy domain, is that the policy itself is making some policy feedbacks on itself, in the sense of Weaver and Jacobs. I mean, the fact that the policy which is in place has failures, and the failure are accumulating and accumulating. It's in France at the moment, it's the case with pesticides. Pesticides are more and more mediatized, discussed in the public spheres, discussed by the public, discussed by the citizen, by environmental NGOs, by consumers who do not want to be poisoned, and it's becoming a kind of pressure which is produced by the policy itself, because the policy encourages farmers to put pesticides, and then perhaps together with social movements, these failures, accumulation of failures, will have the capacity to change power relation. But it's a big deal, because on the side you have the strategies by the big inputs providers who distort research and make what we call, the production of ignorance. They distort research. They produce a lot of information which distort the public debate. And this is the story of public policies. I mean, so I have no real point to solve the situation, but I think it's why I think it's very important to look at how policy controversies and how policy debate takes place, and who is invited in the debate, who can be empowered in the debate. And on the second question, I think I do not think it's more complex at the international level than at the national level. Perhaps it's new. And you said at the national, we know everybody, we know the people, we know the orientations, we know the power relations there are among the actors on the national scene. And when we arrive at the national level, at the international level, it's more complex. And I don't think at all it's more complex. It's very well structured and organized. And it's and I would point to, for instance, my chapter, or for the book, or for the to the chapter written by Osmany, Magdalena, and Patrick, or either the book which has been written recently by Magdalena and Romuald Lormand and the British guy, what's his name? Yes, you can show it, Osmany, perhaps.
David Dolowitz. I have it here.
Shaping policy agendas. And I have a chapter in it too. Well, it's very interesting to see that actually, I mean, international organization and the field, the global policy field is really structured by actors and by power relation, which you can read just as you read the one in your nation, because you know it and it's more familiar. And in what I tried to present just before is, perhaps I shouldn't have passed shaping policy agendas. Yes, that's it. That's the book. So you can go and see, and you will see that each author in this book show how the policies are built actually from by actors which and remain more or less structurally the same, and the field, each sector is structured by some specific institution and power relation. And so in the agri-food field, I really mentioned this dialectic you have between the so-called global or economic transversal organization, WTO, OECD, the World Bank on the one side, which produces the ideas, and very much the sectoral organization, FAO, International OU, and IFAD and World Food Program, and all these, let's say, sectoral institutions, which more or less, with some specificities, apply the policy receipts which are produced by the mainstream dominant hegemonic organization. It's a bit caricatural, say like this, and you should go into all the chapter to understand how it's done. But this is one part of the picture, and the other part of the picture I tried to show, and which is more new, and it's very, I think, important to understand, because power balances will change with this, is that the big multinational and big private interests have understood that they have much more room for maneuver at the international level. They are much more easily able to influence on the debate at the international level than at the national level for many cases, and they powerfully develop strategies that build the global debate. And this is, I could also point to a paper I wrote with my colleagues Nicolas Bricas and Arlène Alpha on the policy and global policies and global policy debate on food security. It's a paper in Journal of European Public Policy. It's called Feeding 9 Billion People, and it's about how the debate is biased by the big actors, big hegemonic actors. I would advise, perhaps, if you want to read my papers, to read this one, but there are many others by other authors like Jennifer Clapp, etc., who look at how the power relations are built in the global agri-food field. But at least you can perhaps go, I can put it in the chat if you wish. So thank you very much for this question. I think these are key questions, but I have no time to elaborate more. Sorry.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Thierry.
Thank you for the question. In France, the public policy analysis and sociology of law have developed more or less together. The main founder, the person which initiated the development of sociology of law was Jacques Comaille, which were at the same time well considered by policy analysts. And I think all researchers who take into account or who work on legal aspects of public policies consider themselves as part of the instrument approach. Every colleague working on legal aspects has read the books of Patrick Le Gallès on the approach by instruments. So it's I think it's the two streams are very close, and it is we can say that it is the same stream in fact. When I submit articles to public policy journals, I present myself as a specialist of legal instruments. So there is no split.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you very much, Thierry, for this comment. I don't see any other questions here in the chat. Let me see on YouTube. Okay, no more questions on YouTube. So I think we are in the sad moment where we have to close the cycle of 5 amazing webinars. I don't know if Regina would like to say anything before we conclude.
Thank you, Osmany. I'd only like to thank again and again and again for all your generosity, for all you've already shared with us. I'd like to thank all the authors and the professors that came here and shared their works with us. And I think it's a wrap. And I hope you have some new partnerships and some new webinars in the next month.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Regina. It was great to organize this cycle of webinars together, to organize the book with ENAP in this partnership. As I mentioned in our first webinar, this project, the idea of this project started back then in 2015 or 16. I met then Patrick and discussed this with him, and then later I met also with Chico Gaetani, and we have conducted a workshop in Paris with most of the authors in the University of Paris 2 to discuss the previous versions of the chapters and the structure of the book. This was in I think January or February 2018, and the workshop was mainly organized by Professor Ève Fouilleux and Patrick Hassenteufel and myself. And I'm really happy that we arrived here. It took a long time, as most of our projects, we know when it's starting, but it's hard to say when it's going to be concluded. And I'm very happy with this book. I think it's going to be a very good contribution for the Brazilian community of experts in public policies. And thank again for the partnership. Thank again Thierry and Ève for being here with us today. I would like also to inform that all the videos are available on our YouTube channel. If you missed one webinar, you can watch them later on. They are available in English. The book can be downloaded on the ENAP website for free on the digital version. If you want the printed version of the book, you can also start your pre-order, and it's going to be available and sent around the beginning of July. Don't forget to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. This is very important for you to stay tuned in everything that we do here in the Laboratory of International Public Policies at the Federal University of Sao Paulo. And that's it. For us, it's almost time for lunch. So good appetite, everyone. And for those who are in France, maybe almost time for dinner. Have a nice dinner. Thanks, everyone. It was wonderful to have you for this 5 past weeks. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.